Well, it is time now to see what's happening in the world of rural real estate, and we're joined by the GM of Rural Property Brokers, Conrad Wilkshire. Greetings, Conrad. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you, Hamish. And g'day, Dom.
Yeah.
How are you, Conrad?
Fighting fit, no doubt. I mean, mate, he's based out of the Manawatu. I mean, how could he not?
Here we
be?
go. The Manawatu love fest
well,
continues.
Oh, it's just, paradise. Hey, Conrad, you had a good chat with Dom this week on his show, Rural Today, around forestry and farming and what opportunities are on offer for farming. So can you just give us a quick recap to set the scene?
Yeah, look, I'll probably ask him the questions why we don't back our whole country farmers to make the best long-term choices for land rather than maybe the default at the moment that it's maybe the domain of the forestry sector or carbon-only interests. I actually think farmers can continue to make some pretty solid choices for their own futures, integrating forestry as part of their farming system without feeling that the default has to be an outright sale. And I think at the core of all that is an understanding that sequestering carbon is actually a property right, and I'm not too convinced that as an industry, count ourselves in that is, how we play a part in helping farmers understand the fact that, carbon is actually a legitimate property right. And I'd be very wary of any legislation that legislates that right away from farmers. And I think it's probably been clouded a little bit between this context between a permanent forest and production forestry and the carbon-only interest in terms of permanent forests. So there's quite a lot of change afoot at the moment with potentially radiata no longer being included in permanent forests. Many in the farming community would see that as a good thing, and I'm not saying that shouldn't happen either. But I do think the misgivings are probably more to do with forestry full stop, and I just think farmer participation in that land use probably is, with good advice, could go a long way, and it could create short and long-term revenue streams that don't compromise the farming business, but give it enormously greater options 5, 10, 15 years forward to today.
Conrad, what have farmers been doing with their land in this regard as far as you can ascertain?
Well, look, the industry itself, I think, and its levy bodies have done a pretty good job of documenting that. The report that I took a lot out of it was the beef and lamb review that they did. They listed Acre Ag to do that study, and the findings of that were published in August last year, in 2021. And, there's been, and in fact, I was talking to somebody yesterday, actually, who had actually participated in one of the government schemes. There's been over 47,000 hectares planted between 2018 and 2020 in that study and that review that was done there. And over 12,000 hectares of that 47 actually went into manuka and native planting. And look, these schemes were really pro-integrated farming system, land use options, and some of it led to honey, but others were the government actually planted the trees and they took the carbon revenues off the back of that, and they've since actually gone and bought further ground again. I think that's there, and I think what's lacking, and I was up at Federated Farmers, hearing the wall of policy change that's in front of the farming sector. And I'm not one to sort of get into that rhetoric, but it's very long on policy, Three Water and what's changed their national environmental standards overlaid, pancaked on top of, existing, well-documented, well-consulted programs of change at the regional level. You looked at how the farmers were looking to actually engage on that. It was bloody hard going because it's long on rhetoric, very short on how, and all forward dated into the future. So you can see how farmers start to put forestry and carbon all into the same bucket, but actually I don't think it is. And the farmer I was talking to in Taranui there, he was saying to me, well, look, I've got over 1,000 hectares. I'd be open to looking at what some of the options are. My family all done very well, but they're all off farm. They're not likely to come back anytime soon. And I'd be open to seeing what options are over just the default of having to sell the farm because there doesn't seem any other options. But there's just not the level of advice at the farm gate and the extension. And I think, to Beef and Lamb's credit, they and others, I might add, there has been Federated Farmers, obviously, have been getting out and about, getting some chat going. But I think, we have to, as an industry, look to make sure we give farmers all the tools. And when we do, as these previous schemes indicate, they are able to make good commercial decisions. My concern at the moment really would probably sit around the fact that we've got into this debate about permanent forest and production forest, which I think is almost a bit of an oxymoron, because a tree's a tree, and who's to say what the extraction costs are and what the rotation length is going to be? It could be that these trees grow out to 50 years, and if we use Douglas fir, for instance, that would be an easy thing to envisage. Renewable energy sources and, the next 10 to 20 years, what is inland ports, all the like. So trying to envisage what production forestry is going to cost to extract, etc., which dominates a lot of the chat about production forestry, I think is a bit of a misnomer. I think you can plant a lot of these trees across a lot of hill country and actually have a real asset there for the future. And there's a lot made about slope, but when you look at in production forestry, unlike permanent forest, production forestry is dominated. Those sales, the Overseas Investment Office, when you have a look at the sales, it's dominated by class 6 and 7 land, particularly on the East Coast. And, to say there's no erosion potential on the East Coast is not correct. You get the sales evidence and the Overseas Investment Office decisions all, have favoured class 6 and 7 land extensively. So, I just think we should be directing some of our policy change and to enable farmers and put proper funding options alongside the farming sector, because the returns, when you look at the price of carbon in New Zealand, it's about half the price overseas. And you look at the need for wood in the future state, why wouldn't farmers have a diversified hedge into that sector versus maybe buying commercial property off farmers? Diversification. Why wouldn't we look at some diversification on farm? And I suppose, just in closing, guys, my underlying concern is that if farmers aren't supported sufficiently and they don't look at some of the options that are available to them, inevitably the market's the market. We can grow radiata faster than anywhere else in the world. International interests aren't going to go away. It already dominates a lot of land transactions. And so the inevitable is that farmers will forfeit that opportunity through a whole range of circumstances, and production forestry will continue to dominate, which actually, I'm not saying that's not the national interest, but I would say, why don't farmers have their own slice of the cake?
I'm very happy with that. I like the diversification on farm as an option. And but again, I think you were put it to me very clearly, Conrad, but these decisions are not easy, are they? As you say, the advice is hard to sort of to garner, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it starts with one fundamental question: do I consider sequestering carbon as a property right? And I don't know farmers. I don't know many people that will give that away without a bit of a fight. If you've got it, if that's a property right and it can, potentially earn 3-4 times a net return in my existing land use, why wouldn't I at least enlist a little bit of support for not a lot of amount of money to actually just get some second opinions on that and about how that could integrate? Yeah. And Hamish, you and I know a lot of people through the 80s that had to get through those farming downturns. And, I know a lot that actually kept their farm by not putting fertiliser on for 5 years as they absorbed all the interest rate costs, and they did a whole bunch of things to get through that session. And also, maybe keep their kids in school education as well. Yep. And they achieved all those aims, and they kept their property out the other side. Well, why, if you were thinking, or if you were contemplating a sale, an outright sale to production forestry, why you'd be putting long-term fertiliser on something that's not going to have any advantage versus you could put, what might have been the back 200 hectares, the money you would have spent fertilising it could have gone a long way to establishing a long-term asset that could, short-term have carbon opportunity, long-term have cutting rights, and not impact the farming system to a significant extent.
Yep. Makes good sense. Always at the leading edge. That is the GM of Rural Property Brokers, Conrad Wilkshire.